Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We will pick up with chapter 11, verse 1. I just want to read the pasuk again. We read the pasuk yesterday. We discussed it a little bit, but just to revisit it, it says in the pasuk, "Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe v'Aaron le'mor alehem." Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron to say to them. And the obvious question is, who is them? I believe we mentioned yesterday that Rashi says them are Elazar and Isamar, the surviving sons of Aaron. We discussed the Ramban yesterday that even though the section here is about kashrus, and one would think that kashrus is equally relevant to all Jews, but this is uniquely relevant to Kohanim because of issues in terms of impurity and issues in terms of people violating things in this section, having to bring offerings. But in any event, Rashi says, so Hashem said to Moshe and Aaron that they should pass this on to the other two Kohanim, Elazar and Isamar. Let's see the Kli Yakar on Pasuk Aleph. Vaydaber Hashem Moshe Aaron lemor alehem. Milas alehem tzarich biur. This to them requires some clarification. Kimasha Piresh Rashi shechozer leElazar v'Isamar shiu gam hema shluchim b'mitzvah zu k'fi shekulam hushvu b'dmima. That which Rashi says that Elazar and Isamar also merit this mitzvah. Rashi is actually touching on something here which we didn't mention yesterday. Aaron is very much praised for accepting the tragedy of the passing of Nadav and Avihu without lashing out at God, screaming out at God, just quietly accepting, which is of course an exceptionally challenging thing. And so therefore there's an idea that this next mitzvah is imparted to Aaron in addition to Moshe as a reward, as a recognition for what he accomplished just now. That's not like with the Ramban we said. So in any event, according to that line of reasoning, so Elazar and Isamar lost a brothers, excuse me. So they also deserve credit for not lashing out at God. Says the Kli Yakar, Eino Mechuver. Kilo Niskra Elazar v'Isamar Kodem. He says it's very hard to believe the reason why Elazar and Isamar are being mentioned or referenced here is because of this great recognition for how they reacted, because they weren't mentioned before. Excuse me. Aaron is explicitly mentioned. Elazar and Isamar are not. Gama pasuk omer vayidom Aaron avalo Elazar v'Isamar. It doesn't say Aaron, Elazar, and Isamar were all silent. It says Aaron was silent. Va'karove lomer shenirmaz b'milas alehem. Inyan Yakar Ma'od. Kli Yakar says, I think what's meant by it being said to them is alluding to a very precious idea. Uvaluma'et kol ha'umos. He's coming, the pasuk is coming to exclude all other nations of the world. V'ukederach shekasvu rabbim and amefarshim inyan isuria machalos. It's like many of the commentators write about the prohibitions of foods. Sheyesh shechashvu shehema brios hagufos urfuaso. There's a school of thought that says that all of this kashrus, what foods we may eat, what foods we may not eat, listed in the following psukim, are because this is God's inside track for the Jewish people on health, and that God made the world and God made us, and so God knows what will keep us healthy. Kli Yakar says that's a possible idea, but he says I don't think that's the pshat. Ve'eno kain sharei kol most ochle basar hasheketz va'achbar. She says, if the idea was that this is the key to good physical health, there's a whole lot of people in this world who don't keep kosher, who are pretty healthy. Don't tell anybody, but not all us Orthodox Jews are that healthy. That's not necessarily because of kashrus, but he says, if that was the concept, why would it be that there's not a clear, discernible difference between people who keep kosher, people who don't keep kosher in their health and well-being? The idea here, says the Kli Yakar, is that this is what's spiritually healthy for us. He says that this idea that non-kosher food makes a detrimental spiritual impact on people's souls. So he says the idea in the pasuk is that this is a concept that God is relating to Moshe and Aaron, le'mor alehem, to say to them, just the Jewish people. That this idea is just for the Jews, because God has a very special focus on our spirituality, and he's very interested in our being able to maintain a lofty level of spirituality. And that is only going to be feasible if we're diligent about this matter. And that's, but it's a special mitzvah for the Jews. So Kli Yakar says that's why it's Aleichem. It's an interesting idea to think about. Okay. Verse 4. Do not eat this from the animals who chew their cud, and the animals with split hooves, as hagamol, the camel. So the camel chews its cud, but doesn't have split hooves, and therefore it's not kosher, because those are the two signs. It has to chew its cud and have split hooves. And then in verse 5, it mentions another animal that chews its cud and doesn't have split hooves. And then in 6, and then in 7, it talks about the pig that has split hooves, but doesn't chew its cud. Okay, so very, very basic question on these psukim. If you were going to write these psukim, and your point was that both signs are important, chewing cud and having split hooves, which one would you put first for the non-kosher animal? There's if an animal doesn't have either, so it's non-kosher. Let's say you want to make a point, it has this, but not that. So if the point in the pasuk is that something's not kosher, wouldn't you say it doesn't have split hooves, even though it chews its cud? The point is that it's not kosher. So if the point is that it's not kosher, wouldn't it make sense to start with the thing that makes it not kosher? Wouldn't that just make sense? And the format in these psukim, none of them are that way. They all start with the thing that makes it kosher, but there's something about it that makes it not kosher. Just an interesting thing when you think about it. So there's a Kli Yakar over here. Kli Yakar on pasuk Daled. Esak amal ki malei gerohu. Haya lo lomar ki farsayin enu mafris. Kli Yakar says the pasuk should have begun by saying that it doesn't have split hooves. She said ikar tam el hatoma, because that is the primary reason that it's ritually impure. V'chein b'shafan v'arneves kosher, that same question for the other animals we just mentioned. Ubechazir amar ki mafris parsahu hayalo lomar keinu malagira. And by the way, lest you say that it's something about talking about the chewing the cud first, one way or the other, when we get to the pig, it specifically says it has split hooves, but it doesn't chew its cud. So it flipped the order. But in each animal, it gives the kosher sign before it gives the reason that it's actually non-kosher. Why would with each one, why would it begin with the aspect that would point towards being kosher? Ubir Inyan said, the explanation of this matter is Shesiman Tahara Shabakulam, Mosif Tumal Tumasam. That actually, again, we're talking sort of in a spiritual, symbolic realm, but the kosher symbol makes it more non-kosher, makes it more impure. It's a famous idea that Esav is compared to a pig. Shaposhet es talafav laharos kilu kosher v'tocho male tochu mirma. V'zem moral komisha ein tocho kabaro k'midas hatzfuim amarabas atzim ksherim famously sufik ruim in a Russia gomer shetochu baroshav in the ra. It's a famous comparison for Esav to a pig. Why? Because the pig has split hooves but doesn't chew its cud. So Esav, so the chewing its cud is an internal aspect, and the split hooves is external. So the pig on the surface level presents itself as being kosher, because the thing that you can see from the outside is of a kosher sign. But that actually is more disturbing, because then we say it's not tochel kabaro. The inside is not consistent with the outside. So Esav, who presented himself as this very pious, whatever, father, what can I do for you? All of that. Esav presented himself as being this great fellow, and inside he really wasn't. So Esav is like the pig. So the Kli Yakar says along these lines, here's the point. It's more disturbing when we see someone. It's more disturbing when we see someone or something that presents itself as being great or good, and then really is not. So actually the kosher sign is being mentioned in a mode of negativity, says the Kli Yakar. It's disturbing in life when something really is not kosher, but it has a sign that it is kosher. Now, we're not really blaming animals for what signs they do or don't have. That's really God's department. But the symbolism of it, really what it speaks to is it speaks to the people in this world who are sort of kind of, and we can think of many people who are sort of kind of. It's very interesting, forgive the digression, but I just heard it last night. So the Yeshiva had a program last night reflecting on the passing of Chaim Kanievsky, and Rabbi Shalom Kamenetsky came to speak last night. He's a very distinguished individual from Philadelphia. And he posed such an interesting question, and I thought the answer was really interesting. So he said, what does it mean to be an Adam Gadol? We throw this term around, Adam Gadol, which is, maybe let's translate as a person of unique distinction. What does it mean to be an Adam Gadol? What does it mean? It's one of these like, well, if I see a person who seems to be of really unique distinction, that's an Adam Gadol. But what are we looking for? So he said, we have blemishes with let's say with a Kohen, if there's a lack of symmetry in their limbs, that's called a blemish. So in other words, if a person, for example, would have one arm that was markedly longer than another, or the body was out of proportion with the head size, or vice versa, that would be something which invalidates. So he said that he thinks what it is to be an Adam Gadol is that everything is in proportion, that everything in a person's life, everything in how they lead their life, it's all in proportion. I thought that was just an interesting idea. And it really fits into this idea of the Kli Yakar, that what we're saying is when we're talking about a non-kosher animal, the sign of being kosher, when it's not consistent with the other sign, is actually a negative mark, not a positive mark. Just an interesting idea to think about. Okay, let's just see verse 7 on the topic of the pig, Vesach Hazir. Ki mafris parsohu v'shom shasesa parsoa v'hu gera lo yigar. The pig has a split hoof. The pig has a split hoof but doesn't chew its cud. Tamehu lachem. It is considered impure. And the language here, v'hu gera lo yigar, is actually a little bit interesting. It's somewhat redundant. It seems to be getting at something. It would have been very easy to say in the pasuk v'hu lo yigar. It doesn't bring up its cud. So the very interesting Orach Chaim over here. V'hu gera lo yigar peirush t'nayu hadavar. We're saying it as a condition, assuming that it's so, that it doesn't chew its cud. Kol's manchu lo yigar. Yigar, as long as it doesn't chew its cud, doesn't bring it up. Maybe some people have heard of this before. There's a Gemara that talks about that in the end of days, the pig will be kosher. That's interesting. And who knows, by the way, you never know with these things. Maybe there's something about cloning, genetic things, who knows. But in any event, he says it's being alluded to in the pasuk. Because by saying v'hu gera lo yigar, actually the implication is as long as it doesn't chew its cud. He said that implies that there'll be a time where it does chew its cud. That'll be kosher. I thought that was an interesting shot. So we discussed this morning the Kli Yakar regarding his position that the directive of kashrus is uniquely directed towards the Jewish people. We discussed the Kli Yakar about this idea of how the Torah refers to a creature that has one kosher symbol, one non-kosher symbol, and we discussed Orach Chaim about the pig chewing cud and possibly changing status down the road.